What's up, guys? This is Teddy. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This video, we're going to be building out more GET requests for our API, and we're going to try and knock out 3 controllers today. This is going to be part 2 in the series. We're going to be doing a part 3 of all these GET requests. So we're going to be building out a lot of GET requests, but this is going to be great because it's going to be a lot of practice, and you're going to learn every combination possible for GET request. Not every possible combination, but you get what I mean. But as I mentioned in my previous video, we just want to go in here. You always want to start out with your interface first because your interface is your blueprint, and it doesn't matter which model we start out with. We are just going to go ahead and jump into the category model first. And I may have mentioned this in my previous video, but you're building these out by the model. So for each, look at it this way, for each Pokemon model that we create, we are going to create a Pokemon controller, a Pokemon interface. For each category that we create, or each category model, we're going to build out an iCategory interface, and we're going to build out a repository for it. And that's kind of the whole reasoning behind why I say that models are the base, or kind of like the foundation, or one of the most important aspects, because our API is literally built around all of them. So enough chit chat, let's build out let's go ahead and build this interface. We're going to start with the category. So iCategory repository, go in here, and we're just going to do just like our Pokemon controller. We're going to have iCollection, we're going to have a category. Go ahead and bring that in so it doesn't mess up IntelliSense, because we're going to have to be bringing in that model to a lot of other ones. And iCategories. And remember, the first one, the plural form, is always going to be, or when you're returning an iCollection, or when you're returning like an actual list of them, remember that it's always going to be plural. So category. And when you're returning just one category, it's just going to be not a collection. It's just going to be the actual category, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it. You're returning this one, you're returning a collection. This one, you're just returning one of the entities. And then down here, we're going to get a little fancy, and we're going to return a Pokemon by the category. Get Pokemon by category. Great. So, and then this one, we're going to be inputting the category ID. So we want to have that, or we want to get it by, not just by the any ID, we want to get it by the category ID. So just be cognizant of that. So we're going to go in here, then we're going to do category exist, and then we're going to have the ID. And this is going to be checking the database, but this one is actually different in that we're not going to be using it to return data. We're going to be checking if something exists, and you want to have this because it makes validation a lot easier. All right, so we've got our interface built out. We've got our, quote unquote blueprint all built out. So we're just going to go in here, and we're going to build out our category repository. That rhymes. Category repository. So just go in here, category repository, and then control dot implement the interface, bring it in, and we can go ahead and start building out. Since we've got our quote unquote blueprints, now we have to actually build out, I call it the guts. I don't really, it's probably like a nasty way to describe it, not like a very professional programming way, but I like to call it you're building the guts, or you're building like the actual methods instead of just having like the shell of them. So ctour, so go in here, we're gonna have our data context, and remember, repository is just a big word for where you put your database calls. Don't get so freaked out by all of these big words. Literally just means that's where you're putting your database calls, and we're putting them in a separate file, because if we have them all in one file, it's just going to be very difficult for other people to work on. And that's a key point. You may know a lot about it, but somebody else might not. And it's kind of, if you've ever, once you guys start getting jobs, which you will because you're a C# programmer and you're not a Python programmer, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I won't go any more into program, but you know, once you get a job, you know, you can code something and it's really easy for you to read, but when other people have to read it, it's, you know, it could suck. So you always have to be cognizant, and you want to separate your concerns. It's another big word. So we'll just, so a lot of people like it when I, you know, talk and I try to explain things a little bit. So we're bringing in our context. Our context is just a fancy word for what is abstract. So context is just a fancy word for the code that sits on top of your database and gives you access to your database. And our categories, we actually, if you remember, we actually made our categories, and any is just a bool. It's going to return a bool if you have any. So if it's going to go in here, it's going to put this in here, and it's going to check if the whatever you pass to the parameter actually has it in there, and it's going to return a Boolean. So nice little tidbit there. So return, all right, context. Then we're going to go categories again. Then let's see. We could just do a toList like this, but actually let's just do it. Let's just do a toList. This is going to be the easiest way to do it, and you could throw like an order by in here, but there's only 4 of them. You could sort it. You could sort it by the name or whatever, but let's just return it by a list since we only have like 3 of them. So ordering it is kind of overkill in this case, I think. And then we're going to go down here. We're going to go to get category, and because we're only getting 1, there's actually an ID passed into it. So we're going to go down in here. We're going to go to our categories. We're going to go where e is equal to e.id. And we're going to search this where by our ID. We're going to get first or default. Remember, if you're only returning 1, you can always tell you're only returning 1 by if it's just a category instead of an iCollection. If it's an iCollection, it's returning a list. And if it's a category, it's only returning 1. And if it's only returning 1, you got to have that first or default. And that could throw you off in the future. So be very cognizant of that, because that has happened to me where I didn't really take note of that, and I would always get so bent out of shape because I couldn't ever figure out what was wrong, and that's what was wrong. So once again, be very aware of that, because that could be a really annoying problem in the future if you don't take note of that. So this one, you have to do a select here because you need to, we're getting real deep here. So in entity framework, if you have a nested entity, and I'll show you what a nested entity is after I get this list figured out. A nested entity is this right here, our navigation property. I call them nested entities, which really, I think the more appropriate term would be navigation property. But if you have a navigation property, it's not going to load it automatically for you. It's another one of those things that you have to explicitly tell Entity Framework to load it for you, or it's not going to do it. So once again, be very cognizant of that. Otherwise, you're going to get those nulls in the future. So you can either do a select or you can do an include. If you want to do an include, there is a slight difference in, I don't really know the difference between them. If you know the difference between them, I always just use include, and maybe that sounds kind of bad, but I always just use include or select, and both of them seem to work. And I think the only difference is that there's a slight difference in how it actually returns the data, but that's probably something I got to look into. I don't know everything, guys, and if you know what it is, leave it down in the comments below, because it could help other people too. All right, so we're going to go here. We're going to create our controller. So category controller, and I am going to just go over here and copy and paste a lot of this. A lot of this code is super redundant, and I'm just going to go in here. I'm just going to copy and paste this up here. I am going to, obviously we got to bring in our controller because we're going to need access to a lot of, we're going to need access to these things right here, like the bat. This is when you inherit from the controller, you're getting access to like bad requests and a lot of these methods that are going to make your life a lot easier when you're designing APIs. And that's the reason that we do that. So let's just go in here. We're going to create a constructor. And now we inject our data context, or we inject our repository into our controller. So iCategory repository. Category repository. We're going to inject that in there. Going to assign field. Don't assign property. Always make sure you're assigning a. I guess you could assign a property, but 99% of the time you just want to assign a field when you're bringing in this dependency injection. I'm going to go ahead and close that. We don't need that anymore. We might need it here in a second, actually. But I just need to get it out of the way so I can bring this mapper in. So inject auto mapper, because we're going to need auto mapper on this one. All right, so bring that in. And let's bust out that Pokemon controller again. And it's being finicky, doesn't want to immediately bring it up. So sometimes copying and pasting code is good because it can be very annoying to have to type all this out. So we're going to go get categories. And we need to create our category DTO. So go in here, click add, and remember a DTO is just a way so that it's not returning all of the data, and we can have more control over how we display our data. Otherwise, it's going to return all of that data, and you need to look at it like you don't want to do that, because what if there's like hashes, or what if there's some type of, maybe I'm sorry, I accidentally copied the Pokemon DTO. We need to actually go down to our category. So go into our category DTO, and I'm going to bring this over here. So we're going to do category. So category, or bringing back a list. Make sure you have that list there in the map, otherwise it will throw an error, and the error is very ambiguous. So if you ever get a really ambiguous error with AutoMapper, just remember that it could be that you're mixing up, that you're not returning a list, and that will help you a lot in the future, because it's another thing that just used to drive me nuts about AutoMappers. I could never figure it out, and then one day I was just like, oh, I'm not returning a list. That's the issue. So then we're going to go in here, categories. Okay, great. And then we're going to change this to categories too. Var categories. Great. Let's do the next one. So Pokemon controller. Oh, it's over here. So just gonna go in here. Once again, toss that in there. Sometimes copy and pasting code is good. And let's be a little explicit about what type of ID that we are trying to return, because that, a lot of times with APIs, the devil is in the details, and I'm guilty of rushing a lot, but these little details like this really make a big difference. And if you're just coding in your, at home and you're just trying to get a job, it doesn't matter. But once you start working for people, you're going to have to start worrying about stuff like that. So, if you're cowboy coding and doing all these crazy things right now, that's okay. But once you start working, definitely want to make sure that you're not being sloppy. Great. And another key point, make sure that these are matching. Otherwise, your API is not going to work, and you're going to get a really weird error. You won't get an error, but Swagger will mess up. So we're going to go down here, category, repository. Category ID. Change this to category. I guess you don't have to, but probably want to, because that would be super sloppy. Then we're going to go in here, do the same thing. Okay. Then let me see here. The next one's going to be kind of, we're not going to be able to copy and paste it because it is pretty unique. And that's get Pokemon by category ID. So we're just going to go HTTP get, and we're going to have our API endpoint look like this. So category ID produces response type. We'll just go ahead and copy that. And it's going to be, this is actually going to be an iEnumerable. And the reason you can use iEnumerable is because everything at the end of the day inherits from iEnumerable. Like iList inherits from iEnumerable. So if you're not really sure, just put an iEnumerable in there. Just, try it out. Who cares? I don't even think that's bad coding practice. I just think, it's just, that's polymorphism though. If you want to know what polymorphism is, that's polymorphism. I've got a whole video on polymorphism too if you want to check it out. So make sure to check that out. So we're going to be getting our Pokemon by the category. So we're going to have our category ID. And we're going to go down in here. Then we're going to var Pokemons, because we are returning, we're getting Pokemons. Yep. And we're not returning a category, we're returning a Pokemon. So Pokemons. So get Pokemon by category. And we're going to do our mapper. Map is going to be a list of Pokemon DTOs, and we've already created our Pokemon DTO, so we don't need to worry about it. Then we're going to have category repository get Pokemon by category. Then we're going to have our category ID. And let's go ahead and bring this down here because that's starting to look like doo-doo. All right, so go back. If the model states, we're going to do a little bit of validation, is valid, return bad. Request, then return the Pokemons. Great. Oh, okay. We need to make it an okay. So that should be it. The only thing that we need to do now is you need to go to your mapping profile, so our helper right here, and you need to make sure that you have a a thing that maps to Pokemon DTOs, and you need to make sure that you have a map that maps to category DTOs. So let me see here. And I was testing these out earlier, so that's the reason I have those, but that should suffice right there. That should be enough to get you by and make it so that your mapping profiles work for the category controller. So I think we have enough time. Let's go ahead and knock out the countries controller. So we'll just go ahead into our countries. Go here. iCountry repository. And I accidentally created a class, so make sure that that's an interface. I do that all the time. I think that's very common. So if you accidentally created a class, just go ahead and make it an interface and everything should be good to go. Alrighty, so going here, we're gonna go iCollection. And in iCollection, somebody actually asked this on the previous video. I think it was, let me see who the name. I think it was Darren Parker. Darren Parker asked, what's the difference between the iEnumerable? The iEnumerable is the one that list and iCollection inherit off of. So iEnumerable is actually the one with the least amount of functionality, and you use iEnumerable when you just want to filter stuff, and you use iCollection is kind of like the median point. So with iCollection, you can actually add and sort data, and list has everything. With a list, you have like length, and you have all these crazy methods, and you could just, in theory, put a list in here. I wouldn't put an iEnumerable. That's probably not the best idea, but you could just put a list, or you could put an iCollection. But I think that iCollection, in a sense, is probably the better one because it's the most appropriate. But experiment with it. Maybe put in, another one. Maybe put in a different type and see like what happens. So, alrighty. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna go. Sorry, I blanked out there. We're gonna go country. Then we're going to go get countries. Then we're going to do our detail. Remember, detail is like when you go to eBay and you click on an individual page and you're trying to or maybe you're trying to look at somebody's Facebook profile after you scroll through a feed, and then you click on the individual profile. This is what shows the individual profile. So that's what that is. So, and then we're going to get country by owner. This API endpoint isn't probably even needed that much, but we're just going to kind of do it just to kind of, get the hang of doing all of these data pools. So we're going to get owners from a country, and int country ID. Great. And then lastly, we have to check. We gotta do all that really repetitive validation. So we're just gonna go in here and we're gonna go int ID, and we're gonna do country exists, and we're doing a lot of repetition here. So hopefully you guys are getting into the habit of creating the interface, creating the repository, and then creating the controller. Country repository. Awesome. Remember, got to go in here, repository, got to bring in our interface. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, that is it. So we're going to implement the interface. We got to bring in our data context. Let me see here. So, once again, we got to bring in the context and we got to bring in the mapper. assign the field, bring in iMapper, mapper. Assign the field. Put underscores underneath these because it makes them look a little bit better. And that's that. Got all of we got our constructor set up. Then go in here, just do a quick return context. This one's super easy. Countries any, and if any matches our ID. Hold on, IntelliSense had it. There we go. Yep. So if any matches our ID, whatever we pass into here, it's going to return a Boolean. So just imagine it, it's passed into here, it's going to go here, it's going to execute, and then it's going to return what we set right here. And that's like the whole idea. So always make sure, like I said, always make sure to be cognizant of what you're returning, because that's a really big deal, and it's something that really tripped me up when I was learning C#. So just remember that. And we're returning, we're going to go into our context, we're going to get all of our countries and bring them back. Countries.order by. We probably, yeah, it's not even doing order by. Let's just return them all at one time because there's only like 3 of them. We're going to return an individual country. So we're going to go in here. We're going to go countries.where E is equal to, we can do C is equal to C.ID. And for some reason it said to list first or default. And great. Yeah, just ignore that green squiggly line. So get country by owner. So we're going to return. We're going to go into our context. We're going to go into our owners table in our database. We're going to go where. We're going to go, because it's an owner ID, you usually just want to call it O. And we're going to go ID is equal to owner ID, and we're going to do a select here. C is equal to C.country. So we're going to select our country and we're going to bring back our country with it. Otherwise, it will not, because it does not load those entities by default. Be very, very cognizant of that. If you don't have the select, it's going to return null. And the Stack Overflow post, it's really hard to Google that question too. It's like an odd question that is really ungoogleable. So be really aware of that, because that's a huge beginner mistake. All right, so we're going to go into our where, and we're going to get C.country, and we're going to go into our ID just like this. So we're actually going to go into the entity and select that country by the ID. So it's going to go into like a nested entity, and I can actually show you. So we're going to go owner. So if you go in, you right click on the owner, go to definition. What we're doing for that one, if you notice, it looks a little bit strange. Like the other ones just have ID. This one is country.id. That's what's happening. We're going into that entity and we're going into this country right here. So you can even go again. So it's like inside, and then it's going to go into our country.id. And that's how that works. So country.id, and then we're going to list because they could be more than one. So get owners from a country. And we're going to create our controller. So just go in here. Visual Studio gives you a way to create controllers on your own, but I've always found it to be really buggy, and I just like to create them on my own. So we've already got our Pokemon controller pulled out over here, and we'll just go ahead and copy all this stuff over. So that, then we're going to get our controller, colon, bring in MVC, got that. Alrighty. Then we'll just drag this back over here and create our constructor. So CTOR. Then we're going to bring in our iCountry repository. Country repository. Then we're going to bring our mapper. Interfaces. iMapper. We're going to go field. Once again, bringing our field over here, assign field. So mapper. Then we're going to go over here, bring in this thing, and let's copy it from our Pokemon controller because I really don't feel like typing all that out. So go in here, drag that back over here. Let's go create, before we get started on this, let's just go ahead and create our DTO. So go in here, country DTO, and pass in all this right here. Then go into your DTO class, just jam that in there. Make sure your mapping profile is set. So we're going to go in here, create map, country DTO, just like that. Bring this, bring this back over here. Get country. Get countries. I think that is spelled like that. So country. We're going to bring back an iEnumerable. We're going to change that to our country repository. And we're going to go countries. Great. So that's our first one. Let's change this to countries. Then put that in there. Let's go to our Poke ID. Just like that. So we're going to go country ID. So make sure that, once again, make sure that those are matching. Copy that. Paste that in there. Change that to country. Change this to country. Change this to country. And we could probably, I'm sure that there's some type of hotkey that we could do to do all of these duplicate things that I'm doing, but they're kind of different too, and I think in this case it's probably just better just to type them out. Sometimes people can get so wrapped up in trying to automate things. Like I can see if you're doing something just every single, you're doing something multiple times a day, but sometimes you can get so wrapped up in automating things you can actually spend more time trying to automate something. So then we're going to go in here, we're going to go to our country DTO, just like that. And these next API endpoints are going to be a little bit different. So let's go down here. Let me see. So we're going to get country of an owner. So it's going to be an HTTP GET. We're almost done. Hang in there. So owners, we're going to have owner ID, just like that. Dot produces response type is going to be 400. It's equal to type of country. Alrighty, then we're going to go in here. Action result get country of an owner. Going to remember to make this the same as what you're passing into here, otherwise it'll give you a really funky error and it's really difficult to figure out what it is. We're returning a country, so we're just going to call this country. And let me see here. We can get this in one shot, make it a fancy little one-liner. And then we're going to put in our repository right here and do get country by owner. Then we're going to do the owner ID. Let's bring this down here because that looks bad. Then do some quick validation. IntelliSense is going to do all of that for us. At least I thought it was going to. Model state dot is valid. Then return bad request if it is not valid. And if it is, so if it gets past that model state validation, we will return our country. And hopefully that should be it. And we need to go into our program file and make sure that we have. So I went in here and I was testing these beforehand, and you just need these right here. So just pause the video for a second and make sure that you have these, because I already typed them out. There'd be no point in me typing them out again. Otherwise, you're going to get an error saying that because what's going to happen is if you don't have those, it's not going to find the dependency injection and your program's not going to work. So make sure you have those, and fingers crossed we should be able to go ahead and run this thing. Okay, great. So we've already tested our Pokemon, so let's go ahead. Let's just test out our categories. So that is that. Yours may look a little bit different. I've been testing and building out this API beforehand, so I've got this one right here, but yours shouldn't probably have that. It might. So we're going to go in here. We're going to find it by individual category. Works. Looking good. Then we're going to find Pokemon. We're going to list all the Pokemon by the category. So forget. This is going to list all the water Pokemon. Yep. List Squirtle. Then we go down to our country. Got Kanto, Saffron City, Millettown. Then we're going to get the country by the individual. We're going to get it by an individual country. Kanto. And then we're going to get all the owners from a country. So we're going to go to owner. We're going to get all the countries that an owner belongs to. And Kanto. Great. So we built out 2 more controllers. We've got 2 more get endpoints after that. And then we're going to start working on our create. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching.